All right. All right, let's go. All right, guys, what's happening, everybody? We are live. I've got my good friend. I call him Hodge. We'll let him properly introduce himself in a second, but I gotta let you guys know Hodge is a great friend of mine. I've known him now for what, maybe like 2 years or so, 3 years, something like that. We started off by playing poker together a lot. Turned into an actual friendship. We've hung out, done cool stuff together, gone out for lunch, and all the good stuff. On top of trying to take each other's money. And I will say that Hodge is a great poker player, a great person. And what shocked me down the line is when he's also a very smart person. Like he was shockingly smart. And he was talking to me about some mushrooms and psilocybin and a lot of really cool stuff that he had a more of a scientific angle from it, not just like, I'm just going to go do mushrooms, bro, type of angle to it. And I just thought, you know what, it'd be so cool to bring a true expert on here, because I've heard a lot of people, Hodge, talking to me about this in the entrepreneurial space, about how they're microdosing and how it's like kind of transforming their life in a positive way. My buddy Garrett Navia said, he's like, I've been microdosing for 3 months, and it's like been able to, I guess, help him. I don't know what the word would be, but kind of like redo his mind or something. I don't know. He's basically much more at peace, and he's able to grow past some issues that I think he kind of had growing up. So without further ado, man, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Carlos. And gosh, what an introduction.
Yeah.
So my name is Hodge, my nickname, or James.
Or Jenny.
Yes. So for your viewers, I am a graduate student studying psychoactive substances, and my particular interests are how small molecules can affect behavior long term. So you take a drug, anything, and we can get into a little bit of how we define what a drug is. But essentially, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. What I was, you're doing great, man. What I would love it if you could tell, and you're already getting into it, but tell us a little bit about like how you actually got into it. Because I was reading your LinkedIn profile, and it kind of talked about how you were in Japan, and I think like discovered some interesting things there about suicide and some crazy stuff, and it kind of led you down a path. Tell us a little bit about, I guess, who you are, obviously, but how did you get into this space?
Yes.
How did that happen?
Yes, that's a great question. So my background is in Zen Buddhism and medicinal chemistry. So when I was in undergrad studies, I was fascinated with Zen Buddhism and mindfulness and meditation. I think that is a very hot buzzword today, is being mindful of your consciousness and who you are as an individual, and being centered, I think, is a very interesting phenomenon. Well, I think many Zen practitioners attempt to do that through meditation. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. And I have a really soft spot for mental illness. And I'm a very big push for, destigmatizing it. And I think that we need to talk about, if we're feeling down or feeling lonely, I think these are open conversations that need to happen. Unfortunately, and I don't mean to bring this up, but COVID has fucked everybody up. And excuse my language.
Bring it up. You can say anything you want.
Yeah, I'm very, very passionate about that. And I think that on a psychological scale, COVID has, made people panicked, and there's so much information and we just don't know what's going on. And the fear and the unknown brings physiological stress to us emotionally, and it's draining. And so I think right now in 2023, moving forward, is there's this heavy push for, is there a way that we can help people who feel down and depressed? Now, I think that psychedelics come into play because psychedelia, number one, is a drug class that is very psychoactive to the brain. In other words, it binds to certain receptors and magical stuff happens.
That's not to cut you off too much.
No, please.
So as you know, I've kind of dabbled a little bit in it, but I I don't know what the hell I'm doing, man. This is why, partly why I always want to interview you, because you're the guy to talk to about this stuff.
Yeah.
When I was thinking about this, I'm like, so I smoke marijuana, and I heard about these THC receptors in your brain, and like, I guess I don't know too much about it, but I was like, at first, my understanding of mushrooms was that it was just kind of like it was poisoning me, maybe, for a lack of a better word. I didn't realize there's actual receptors for
Mhm.
this.
So yes, so let's take magic mushrooms, for example. Magic mushrooms is what is called a serotonergic psychedelic, although it has a very high binding affinity, or it's really attached to a certain, many receptors, I should say, some more than others. But a couple receptors that are hot topics as of now is this serotonin 5-HT2A. It's this serotonin receptor, and essentially it has very high binding affinity to, now here's the thing, within magic mushrooms, the secret ingredient, you should say, or the psychoactive ingredient is psilocybin. Everybody's heard of psilocybin.
Right, absolutely.
That's the small molecule that is psychoactive. Excuse me. Yeah, it is psychoactive within the mushroom. Now, it gets dephosphorylized, okay, into psilocin.
What does
And
that mean
yes,
for a guy like me?
yeah, perfect. So imagine psilocybin is a square or a rectangle per se,
Okay.
and enzymes in your body break it down and turns it into a circle. It's still there, but it's different. And I know that that's I'm stretching that a little bit as far as like the neuroscience of it, but I think that it's important to stress that it changes the molecular structure. It's the metabolizing of the drug.
So is that what helps people kind of overcome all these past traumas and things that happens? Like, maybe we should start with that, because I have so many questions. I feel like I'm just asking out.
No, please. No, that's okay. So I think firstly, I really want to say first and foremost with psychedelics is that they are not the answer. And I know that that's probably like, oh, what's going on here? Psychedelics offer a way for people to think in a different state of consciousness. They alter our minds in which we cannot describe, or what is a common vernacular in the scientific field is ineffability, not being able to describe the event. And I think it's important to really stress what is called the integration of the effects. So I took this medicine, or I took, magic mushrooms, psilocybin, and you reflect upon the experience and try to positively integrate that into your life. I think that's the common theme of psychedelics is I want to potentially try to see myself in a different form. And you're right, it does bring back a lot of repressed memories. I think that many psychedelics definitely offer that. But I think it's like I had said earlier, right now in the clinical trial space, let's talk about the room.
Yeah.
So in clinical trials and within research, it's very interesting because it's a room, and due to past, I should say, nefarious behaviors, the common rule is 1 male, 1 female to a room to kind of make sure that everything is, within an interesting, safe space.
Sure.
And I think that overall, the patient's well-being is first and foremost the most important thing. Because as you know, psychedelics are very powerful substances. And I feel as if we put people in dangerous situations, as positive and great psychedelics can be, they can also cause severe trauma or induce maybe a bad trip. So I think having a proper environment is absolutely critical.
So maybe let's talk about that kind of thing, like creating the right environment. What are there certain things like when you guys are doing, where are you right now? You're in like Wisconsin or something?
Yes.
So
Mhm.
how are you guys doing your tests and stuff? Are you trying it on each other or like
No, 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 no. So it's
labs or something?
interesting.
Or
So
how does
we
this
are
work?
boring and we don't do the drugs. We study them. And I just want to also say this. I am not affiliated with any universities at a laboratory scale. I'm a graduate student
Okay,
studying psychoactive substances, and my degree will be in pharmaceutical sciences.
got it.
Um, and so I think it's really important, like going back, what I like to do is take a lot of the literature that is being published and breaking it down so that everyday people can understand, because it's a lot of dense vocabulary.
Right.
And so the problem, though, and I'll tell you this in research, is the problem, oh boy, is reproducibility.
Okay.
Like, in other words, how can we have the same trial when every time you do it is different? And what do I mean by different? Well, there's a paradigm called the set and setting when you do psychedelic assisted therapy. The set is the mindset of the individual. How are you feeling? What's your mood like? And the setting is the environment. So like the decor, the wall art, usually that they'll do, excuse me, like put a blindfold and then have you wear headphones, and then they curate a playlist, which is my interest right now, is
Oh,
music and
that's interesting.
psychedelics.
How would those go hand in hand? How does that work together?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. So I'm studying right now altered states of consciousness and music perception. And I think it's really interesting when you take a different psychoactive substance, you hear something differently. Like
Interesting.
either the pitches can be altered, things can be more drowned out. I mean, music sounds vastly different when I'm drunk versus, stoned. So
Sure.
music sounds very different. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. What are some things that people are using magic mushrooms for? Because
Mhm,
I mean, I guess I mean that's really my question, but I
mhm,
bring it up again because I feel like it's almost blown up in like the last, for me, it's coming to my circle within the last like 2 years. I
mhm,
mean, it's been popular for a long time, but over the last 2 years, at least in the business and entrepreneurial space, there's just this it's just it seems like it's everywhere. Like, and people, when I say it's everywhere, it's not like people are doing shrooms or magic mushrooms and like and doing it just to hallucinate or whatever the
mhm,
effects are. They're actually using this almost like as a therapy, right? And
mhm. Oh, most definitely.
yeah, my buddy Garrett, for example, he said on a podcast that I just did with him recently, he said it was like he went to I don't know how many years of therapy that wasn't really kind of helping him the way he was hoping, but
Mhm,
after 3 months of microdosing with magic mushrooms, it like transformed his life. And I know, and we came to talk about this because I've known him since I'm 36, he's probably 37 now.
mhm,
I've known him since he was like 15 or 16. So we've known each other for a long time, and I saw a noticeable difference when I spoke with him on a Zoom call. I'm like, what are you doing, man? Like, you just seem different in a better way, but just something about him. And that's when he said, I've been microdosing magic mushrooms. And I'm like,
mhm.
geez, it's like everywhere. So that was a long question, but like, what are some of those, I guess, things? Maybe if you could kind of talk about that with like therapy and magic mushrooms
Mhm.
and like, what are some of the things people are using this for?
Yeah, so right now I feel as if our that's a very interesting question. We as human beings are curious about altering our minds. And I feel as if it's therapeutic form or recreational form, it might be a unpopular opinion, but I think to each his own, so long as you're doing it safe.
Hmm.
Harm reduction is very important. And going back to your friend, I think that that's wonderful that this form of therapy for him is working for him. And I'm glad that he's having a noticeable change. But Carlos, this is a very interesting topic you bring up, is microdosing. And in the scientific space, there is a call and dire need for more research.
Because I know you're going to get into this a little bit more, I think, but what is microdosing? Is it, because I hear people talking about like they take 2 grams or 3 grams, and I'm like, that sounds like a lot. That doesn't sound like a microdose to me. What is a microdose?
Sure, sure. So right now they usually say you've got your magic mushrooms, and I want to make this very clear distinction. You've got your magic mushrooms, which is the actual fungi. You also have psilocybin, which is the molecule, right?
Inside
Within
the magic
the
mushroom.
magic mushrooms. Yes. In clinical trials, many clinical trials, they extract the psilocybin from the mushroom and then they put it into a pill.
What? So does this, okay, so
And that's
you know,
pure, it's pure psilocybin.
does that remove the like tummy ache that you get? Because when I did this, I had the worst nausea. I've done this 3 times, 4 times, and I don't think I've taken more than 1.5 grams or 2. And every time, the last time was the only time I actually threw up. The other
Oh
times I
no.
never threw up. I was fine. It was like I had some nausea, but then I was fine. But this last time, I don't know, maybe it was because I had just eaten a big steak. Maybe I should have done it right then and there. But
Mhm,
30, 45 minutes after eating 2 caps or whatever it was, I
mhm.
was I was feeling a little nauseous. So when you extract the psilocybin from the mushroom, does it eliminate that? Is the mushroom what's getting you nauseous, or
Well,
what's
here's the thing. I'd like to state no matter what you take, everybody's different and everybody will have
right?
different symptoms. And
Sure.
of course, dosing is very important. But yeah, it is possible for people to have nausea, especially when they have the fungi, because they have a very robust cell wall, and for our stomach has to break it down. I don't know, there's a common method to pre-metabolize the magic mushrooms. It's called lemon teching, where people will add lime or lemon juice to the mushroom, and then it will help break down the psilocybin to that psilocin molecule. And yeah, no, I think it's interesting, like the overall effects. And I think it's important that if you pay attention to like the nausea, vomiting, how can we take these medicines without having it, if that makes
Right.
sense?
Yeah, because and I keep talking about Garrett because he's the guy I just recently spoke with, but I've had numerous conversations about this. I don't know if I asked, I probably should have. Like when he says he's microdosing, he's like,
Yeah.
I don't even get high or whatever it is. He's like, I take a little bit and then I drink my tea or coffee or whatever it is
Sure,
afterwards.
sure.
You know?
So here's the thing, and this is what I will say right now. I'm sorry, going back to your original question
Yeah,
about
yeah, yeah.
microdosing. So right now they pretty much say anywhere from 0.1 gram to like maybe 0.5 grams. Um, but I don't know. It's right now very controversial, I will say, about microdosing and placebo. And I think it's very important that more research is being done, because you have to ask yourself, okay, I'm taking less of a dose, like less of a psychoactive dose, but those molecules are still binding to those receptors. So my question is the form of tolerance,
Right.
how well somebody does it. And there's an interesting experiment done actually, by Balzas Zingretti, and he did a kind of like public scientific data. And it was like, okay, I'm going to ask you to do your own microdosing experiment. And I want you to put a sugar pill placebo in there. Like take it and then make them look the same, like put them in pill form and mix them. And what I found interesting is right now, the people who got the placebo but thought they got the microdose did very, very well.
Interesting.
They noticed less depression. And for me, I think personally, there's nothing wrong with it. You know what? Even if it is potentially a placebo effect, so what? I live my life as a placebo. You ever go to a Chinese restaurant and get a fortune cookie?
Yeah, of course.
Right? It's
Yeah.
placebo. I'm gonna read this fortune, it'll be mine. Poker for instance, I'm a very skeptical individual. If I got hearts, I've got a lot of heart.
Yeah, man.
Shout out to Tony G.
Pocket twos pre-flop and then win. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, but I'm sorry, but anywho's, but it was an interesting study. It was about like 200 participants, and they a microdosing experiment. So, and that's another thing too, is there are so many different species of magic mushrooms. And so it's like, how can you with great fidelity tell me how much psychoactivity is within each mushroom? It's too different.
Right.
And it's very similar to like the cannabis plant with different cannabinoids.
That's right. You have like different potency levels and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
When you were talking about like extracting the psilocybin from the mushroom, how do you do that? Is that like a needle or something? Like, how do you?
So that's a great question. For me, I personally don't do that,
Okay.
But what very, very cool biotech companies do, and they're all over the place. I would highly suggest doing that research.
Yeah, that's so it's just such a cool world.
It is, and we'll bleed into psychedelic businesses in a moment, which
is
a very interesting space.
Let's go into that. What kind of businesses are coming out? I've seen like what is it? Is it like a coffee or some kind of drink? I get hit on YouTube for some kind of. I actually don't know if it's
like mud water or something.
Yeah, bro, that was it. I was like, it's something with an M. I can't remember. Yeah. So is that? Tell me. Yeah, let's dive into that. You can.
So, from my understanding, mud water is not psychoactive, and I would have to reread the ingredient list. It's not like a trip, like traditional, But here's the thing: fungi in general can be very nutritious and offer a lot of benefit to us. And I like to implement shiitake mushrooms into my diet, not because I'm Japanese, but I think fungi are very, very interesting, and they have a lot of medicinal properties. And if you are a part of that and drink it, great. And if you feel great.
Right. What kind of businesses have you know? And I don't know if maybe this is outside of your kind of realm, but like what kind of businesses have you noticed that are starting to come from this now that it's becoming much more popular?
Yeah, I think right now it's the Wild Wild West.
Yeah.
Oregon, Colorado, California, everybody is popping up with either the decriminalization or essentially legalization, right? And of possession. And I think it's really, really important that we have honest conversation, because I am not a fan of the scheduling list right now, as cannabis being a Schedule 1, but the states are fighting back, not to get political or anything, but I think it's important that we have common discussion about rearranging what a scheduled drug is. Because look, I don't know if this is my mindset that is popular or not, but I believe in personal autonomy. And I feel like if you want to alter your mind in a specific way, you should be able to do it, so long as it doesn't lead to negative effects long term, or you're not harming yourself.
Right.
And it's an interesting point. I'll get back to the psychedelic businesses in one moment, but psychedelics are actually not for everybody. And this is a hot topic. I think certain people that do a psychedelic may be worse after it.
Interesting. Yeah, let's talk about that, because I've never heard that perspective.
Yeah.
Literally no one is giving that perspective. Everyone is saying, you should do this. It's like a game changer. You're a human, do some shrooms,
Yeah, well, here's the thing is, I am, as being a, very, very devout scientist for truth and knowledge, I like reproducibility and actual data. I want to see the numbers. I want to see it correlated. And for me right now, it's not an all or nothing thing. There are people with, various psychological disorders who are on very heavy duty meds. And if it's prescribed by your physician and it's working for you, great. But I am very weary of people in this hype of psychedelics stripping off of their medications in hopes of trying a different thing, because it's very, psychedelics are sexy right now.
Right.
They're a hot topic for depression, anxiety, PTSD. But it's, certain people should not be doing psychedelics. And I'm not trying to say, or segregate a certain group of people, but I do believe that certain individuals have a tendency to become even more traumatized by the psychedelic.
Are there any like character, like how could someone know if they're the type of person that maybe shouldn't do this type of stuff? Are there certain characteristics that you're like, yeah, you kind of fall into the category of maybe this isn't for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the current paradigm as of now is they like to have patients, especially with like major depressive disorder, to eliminate some of the more complicated diseases, psychological disorders, maybe, oh goodness,
Like
schizophrenic
schizophrenia.
disorder.
Oh my gosh, we like read each other's mind.
Yeah.
Schizophrenia too.
Schizophrenic disorder. And,
Right.
if you have these hallucinations, it would be a very interesting study to see whether or not psychedelics hushed the voices or increased them.
Right.
Maybe somebody, and here's the thing is, like, I just want people's safety is all. And
Mm.
I want people to be very cautious with it, because yes, there's a lot of hype, but here, I'll give you an example. Let's say if you have an individual who's, suffers from pretty bad depression and takes the psychedelic without any proper guidance, or they have a messy home, they're buried in debt, they haven't been really preparing it, they just want an altered thing, they just want to escape from reality. I would really urge that individual to say, okay, you know what, if you want to alter your mind, that's fine, but do it in a way that mitigates negative outcomes. Or in other words, find support, find somebody who you genuinely trust. That's so critical. And another concept that's really a hot topic is, availability. Like, people in Colorado, there are mushroom shops popping up. And my thing is about dosing. And they have like their ingredients of their proprietary blends. And then we dive in, we're going full circle to psychedelic capitalism.
Right.
Very interesting. It's the Wild West. People are trying to patent their own
Shroom kind of deal.
version, you should say.
Right.
Imagine if it's a different Pokemon, right? The Pokemon of psychedelics. And it's there's a paper that was written, and it was, there are thousands upon thousands of mind altering substances.
Wow.
If we take you back to chemistry, you can mess around with the molecular structure and design a drug and see, like, okay, how does this work? And how
Yeah.
does it bind to the receptors?
This may or may not really be a question for you, but it popped
Sure.
in my head because I feel like I've heard them almost compared, mushrooms and ketamine.
Ooh, yeah. So ketamine right now, so ketamine is what people know as horse tranquilizer.
Yeah, I
And
just started hearing about this.
yeah, yeah. And
What is
ketamine,
this?
yeah, ketamine's a very interesting. So it is a dissociative hypnotic, and it's a very good anesthetic.
Sounds fucking dangerous. It sounds
Well,
like it's gonna be a
here's
serial killer.
sure. So yeah, I mean, well, here's the thing though. Ketamine is an interesting molecule because it works very differently. The mechanism of action is very different to psilocybin. It's an entirely, I would argue, maybe different drug class, but it offers very similar therapeutic function. It's
Mm.
interesting.
Is it made in the lab essentially? Is this like,
Ketamine?
yeah, I don't know anything about it. Is ketamine made in like, is it like the pure like pharmaceutical version of like mushrooms or something? Like I'm not.
Yeah, no, it's interesting that you say that. So right now, so ketamine, like I had said, is a dissociative hypnotic, and it's actually its origins is PCP.
Oh my gosh.
Have you heard of PCP?
I've heard of PCP.
Yeah.
I saw a guy get in a fight while he was on PCP, and it's like he didn't feel the punches as they were hitting him. It was very scary to watch.
Yeah, and it's interesting because intravenous ketamine, and you have to look at the molecular structure of it, but there's two different forms. It's chiral. So in other words, you have a right-handed form and a left-handed form of ketamine. And furthermore, it's interesting because you can take ketamine in different ways, whether it's sublingual or like Halls. You can do it through the nose, which actually got FDA approval. Spravato.
Spray or something like a
Yeah,
nose
it's a
spray?
nasal spray,
Huh.
and you can get it IV. And it's interesting, I think, because ketamine in particular, yes, has shown a lot of promise for depression. I will say ketamine, I used to work in addiction medicine clinic, and I assisted people who suffered from substance use disorders. And what I noticed was ketamine was a highly abusable drug.
Mm.
I don't know if you've heard of the K-hole.
Oh, tell me about that. What is that?
Yeah, it's a phenomenon and where it completely strips of who you are, and it's impossible to describe the phenomenon until you've experienced it. Psychedelics is very interesting, like we'd been talking about, as far as the difficulty to describe it. I like to compare psychedelics to sex. It's like,
I
okay,
love your examples.
yeah, no,
Okay.
it's like, okay, how do you describe what an orgasm feels like? Well, you can't until you've had one.
Right.
That's like with psychedelics. You cannot describe what it is or how you feel until you've done it. And yeah, so long as if you have a proper safe sit and setting and a good mindset, and I think the common practice is to just have an open mind and explore,
Right.
breathe, concentrate on your breath, and dig deep, because you have to really, before you do any mind altering substance, I always like to tell people to have not a goal per se, but why? What's your why for altering your mind? Addiction is a very interesting space because it's a group of people who cannot control the impulsivity of using the substance.
Mm.
And some substances have a higher addiction, or you could say addictiveness, than others. And for the most part, psychedelics have a very low addictive profile when compared to other psychoactive substances. Very high addictive substances, as we all know and love, and I'd be a hypocrite if I didn't say I drank, is alcohol. I love a good scotch and
Right.
beer. And alcohol is very, very psychoactive. It puts you in a different state.
It does.
And so my question about this, paradigm of safety is ask yourself the question, how often do we alter our mind? And in what sense is it to just kind of like take it in and say, okay, how much space am I going to give myself until the next dosing regimen? Because if you're an individual that slaps LSD every single day, I don't think that would be, I don't know, I'm very weary.
Right.
And yeah, and that would be, oh my goodness, I just thought about like psychedelic warfare. That terrifies me.
Psychedelic warfare. What that sounds interesting. What does that even mean?
It's something that I just think about is, unfortunately, with these mind altering substances, I feel as if in certain environments it could induce rather unpleasant experiences. And let's say if you had LSD, like the government in the early years of the 60s had MK Ultra and attempted to like mind control experimentation with various psychoactive substances. And there's this quest for government control to be able to facilitate how the mind works. And if you have the power of calmingness or to be able to change one's mind, psychedelics are very counterculture. And I still think that, we are on the rise from a very deep fall of psychedelic research because they're still scheduled, federally scheduled. And it's a matter of time before the universe catches up.
Right.
Because I envision a world in which you can go to the supermarket and purchase a substance to alter your mind. And there's been discussion about maybe a psychedelic driver's license.
Oh gosh, that's interesting.
Yeah, where you take
You're
a
going on a trip, you
class.
may as well get a license. Don't crash.
Yeah. And so you take like a course on proper steps. But the issue, though, is even researchers in the academic realm are they've got difference of opinions amongst each other.
Right.
And it's difficult to unwrap it because it's so complicated. There's so much going on, and there's a lot that we just don't know.
Why do you think it's becoming so much more popular now? Like it almost seems like, at least in my world, maybe it's just been popular forever. I know shrooms have been around forever, but it just seems like there's just like resurgence of like people trying this again. It reminds me of like when weed was starting to become like recreational and medicinal in so many states, and now like more than half the country or whatever is like somehow legalized marijuana. I feel like we're like that's kind of where we are with this. What do you think is it like made this kind of explosion happen?
Yeah, well, circling back to our earlier conversation, I think it's the world's almost panic to try and find something to help with our unease, the cloudiness, the just mental drainage. And I feel like when somebody alters their mind, it gives them a sense of, whoa, introspection. And then if we could use that introspection to promote healthy habits, whether it's daily meditation, exercise, drinking water, which I'm trying to do more. I feel like I'm always dehydrated. But yeah, I think psychedelics have boomed. Number one is because it's something new. It's something that you can't describe until you've done it. And secondly, I think it's also interesting. People do it for creativity. And my interests with music and psychedelics, many musicians, as we've known, use psychedelics to enhance their musical creativity.
So you mentioned something earlier about how like mushrooms aren't the I forget the word you used. It's not like the magic ingredient or the secret. It's like it
A
almost
magic bullet.
the magic bullet, right? It's
Yeah.
not like you're going to take some shrooms and now, all of these issues that you've had in the past are now done, or all this creativity is now flowing through you. So do you almost, I don't know if the right word is a process or a guide, like what's the thought process, I guess, when you're taking mushrooms? Like you're using this, okay, I'm going to take this mushroom to get into this altered state, but now that I'm here, like what do I do? Do I sit there and think through certain questions, or like what would you say is the proper way for someone who maybe wants to experiment with this? But when you say alter your mind, it kind of freaks me out because I don't know what that like
means.
I don't really know what it means.
No, I'm sorry. I look, I think when I say alter your mind, I mean your mind is in a different state. And when you take anything, whether it's Food is a mind altering.
Oh, it totally is.
Yeah. Like, have you ever had like chocolate cake
Chocolate.
and yeah, the glucose is very, very mind altering. And so when you deal with different molecules that induce an influx of neurotransmitters, like either dopamine or serotonin, you unlock that sense of, wow, like it's almost, I don't know how to describe it. In other words, like a
Like another
childlike state.
perspective, maybe.
I'm sorry?
It almost seems like the way you're describing it, it almost seems as if like you're entering an altered state, but you're able to maybe look at something from another perspective. Like I talked
Correct.
with weed years ago. I think weed is what has actually helped me grow my business, because whenever you're growing your business at any level, really, but in the beginning for me, I was super stressed out because I didn't know how to get clients. I didn't know how to do these things. I'm like freaking out. I got bills to pay. And one of the things that happens with me is if I get super overwhelmed like that, my like I just start shutting down almost. It's like I start retracting, and that's not good. You're gonna just die in business.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
most definitely. And I'm glad that you found a medicine that helps for you. It's
Well, that's the
important.
thing. If when I realized, I was like, I would just smoke a joint or like a half a joint or whatever, and it would kind of put things back into perspective. Like I would, it would take away a lot of the anxiety of like all of these things are kind of compounding and falling and all these things. It would take away the anxiety, and I would almost just be able to think about it. I don't know if clearly is really the word, but I would be able to think about it without that anxious feeling and kind of come up with solutions, because I was looking at it almost like here's like the next step. I don't know like the 30 steps ahead, but here's like the next 1, 2, or 3 steps I got to take right now. But before I had smoking that joint, I was just paralyzed by fear because I didn't know what direction to go in. I couldn't make a decision. And although weed, I don't think necessarily makes you more decisive, it helped me calm down so I could just look at the situation just for what it is, not more, not less, just calm down. And so when you're talking about maybe all getting in an altered state of mind, that's how I'm looking at it. I'm not hallucinating, but it does slow things down to where I'm able to kind of look at it for what it is.
For what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the interesting part, unlike, alcohol or cannabis, psychedelics offer a hallucinogenic component. In other words, your visual and audio cortex is altered. Your vision is, and it's interesting because, visuals are a very interesting phenomenon within, taking a psychedelic. People report, visual color patterns, but it also depends too on what you take in your dosing.
Right.
Higher the dose, you'll probably see more visuals. I don't know. That would be an interesting study. But that
what kind of, when you're talking about like visuals, like what happened with me when I took shrooms, I had these, I took some on my land recently.
Yeah.
Light bulbs. I figured it'd be beautiful to do it on the land because I'm in the middle of nowhere. I'm at peace. It's like you can see the stars and shit. It's beautiful out there.
Yeah.
And but we did set up, my buddy Brandon and I set up some lights and stuff out there. And what it seemed to happen was like, well, after I threw up, I threw up, but everything kind of seemed to like, I don't know if the word would be breathe, but it almost felt like as if the light bulbs were pulsating a little more, or breathing could maybe.
Sure. Yeah. No, it's interesting you say that. So yeah, I would say like magic mushrooms can offer that wavy visual. And I think if you're a fan of cinema, watch the horror film Midsummer, where they drink the mushroom tea. I think the director, oh, his name is spacing on me, did a phenomenal job of depicting a magic mushroom visual, very wavy.
Right. Because I didn't see like aliens and stuff. Maybe I didn't take enough. I don't know when people think when someone says hallucinate, I think I'm going to see a green monster or something in front of me. But that's not what happened with me.
Well, technically, a hallucination is an altered state other than being 100% like sober. where the moment where you have no molecules that are specifically distorting normal vision.
Could alcohol then, I guess,
Oh,
give you yeah,
yes.
because you were talking about
Alcohol
that.
can cause double vision.
Yeah,
Hence
exactly.
why the
That's what I mean.
DUIs.
Yeah, you can like black out, double vision. Yeah, a lot of
Mhm.
bad things that can happen
Oh,
without.
yeah.
Um, that's really interesting. So okay, so that's because that's kind of what I was looking at. I'm like, when you say jumping or like kind of going into an altered state, it sounded scary for me, when you're
Yeah,
saying that, but I think I understand a little bit more. It's being able to see from a different perspective almost. If you
exactly.
if you could compare it, because this is kind of like what I've been struggling with, because I like I said, I tried shrooms 4 times now.
Mhm.
Each time I wrote myself a letter. I'll tell you. I didn't write myself a
Yeah.
letter. I wrote myself a message when I was doing shrooms. And where is it? Gosh, now I can't find it here. Anyway, I wrote myself a message basically
Mhm.
explaining how I felt. And
Oh,
and then
good.
yeah, well, when I woke up the next day, because then I went to sleep and stuff in the tent and woke up, everything was fine. But when I went to sleep the next day, I read the message again. I'm like, these are similar things I would be thinking about if I was just smoking a joint. The difference
Mhm.
is when I smoke a joint, it calms my stomach. It like, if I'm
Sure.
nauseous and I smoke, it calms the stomach. It doesn't make it worse. I don't I don't know if I don't think I go into like an altered state of mind, but when I'm at peace and I'm alone or maybe just with Tiffany or something like that,
Mhm.
I do start thinking a little bit deeper and I'm in my own thoughts. And I think marijuana kind of gives you that ability to have that introspection and look in. So I guess my question really is like, is marijuana like what's the difference in benefits between marijuana and mushrooms? Because
Oh,
if for me,
goodness.
I felt like
Yeah.
mushrooms didn't I felt like weed was better for me. I don't know.
Sure, sure.
I don't.
Yeah. Like I said previously, different psychoactive substances will help or hurt different people.
Yeah.
And depending upon, what medications you're already taking, what kind of, diagnoses that your physician and you had established and trying to process. And I want to destigmatize it. Like if you have depression, if you have PTSD or anxiety, I know it can be very debilitating.
Yeah.
Um, but if we make it a common theme and talk about it, and I'm not trying to get all, there's a very interesting perspective of being mindful of the psychological health, because I feel like, we do lack a certain hold on who we are as an individual. And I think it's very important for growth to pause and say, okay, where am I? Who am I? What do I want to become, this stride for tomorrow and the future? And to constantly bring yourself back to that is very important.
Yeah. A lot of people nowadays, just in general, I don't think have like their own creed or like code that they really live by. I think that's important,
Well,
that
but I don't know, Carlos. I think maybe, I don't know. I feel like human beings are creatures of habit and they do have a creed, but it's a creed that leads them down a different path. A path that, yeah, so maybe, altering. And I feel like, for me, like I've always, very struggled with my own weight. And it's
you're in
interesting.
great shape. Are you serious?
I have, yes.
You guys in such good shape,
Oh
guys.
no, goodness gracious,
That's
no.
ridiculous.
I know when I was, yeah, the
Really?
winter of 2014, yeah, I was almost 300.
Really?
Yeah, I was like
I can't even imagine
yeah,
that.
280,
I
290.
can't
Yeah,
even
and it was very
imagine.
debilitating. And I loved food. Food was a mechanism for me to, kind of just, I don't know, it was very
Feel good.
odd. And I went to it, and it's very comforting. It's very
Right.
psychedelic. Food is psychedelic.
Yeah.
um, but and so I was like, okay, how can I, you know, approach this? And I tried to do it by myself and it didn't work. And that's where I got professional help. And I think it's very important to establish things that are essentially crippling your life and, making sure that, you understand who you are as a person. Don't beat yourself up for your flaws. Everybody's got them. But really pick yourself up. And I think the world needs a little bit more kindness and love. Just be nice. It's not hard to be nice.
Right.
you know.
Well, where do you kind of see magic mushrooms over the next, say, 3 to 5 years? Because that's pretty close. That's coming up, you know?
Yeah, yeah. So it's very difficult to say, and I have no crystal ball, but I will definitely and I am a poker player, so gambling.
Ah, let's
I'd
go.
put my chips on, yeah, it's gonna even get more greater in popularity, as we've seen many celebrities use magic mushrooms as a way to look at their life differently. Um, and it's becoming very popularized. But the biggest point, though, is okay, not only how do we properly dose somebody, because that's a very hot topic of when are you back to soberness? Like,
Right.
if it's great that it helps, but okay, when is it appropriate to return to work? And do you want your brain surgeon after a psychedelic-assisted therapy session to perform surgery? At what point would it be appropriate for this individual to go back? And I think that that's an important conversation to have. Like, specifically Colorado, I would say it's very interesting with DUIs and cannabis, because if they do a mouth swab and you smoked the previous night and you just didn't brush your teeth, you will have cannabis, you will test positive for cannabis.
Oh, that's
And
yeah.
cannabis is a very hydrophobic molecule. In other words, it's very fat soluble, and that's why it stays in a lot of people's fat cells. And it's interesting because people who are chronic stoners who then exercise may see a bump or an increase in concentration.
That's so cool. That's so cool. I had no idea.
Yeah, it's very interesting. But to your earlier point though about comparing cannabis to magic mushrooms to ketamine, or I don't know if this is a molecule we talked about, but MDMA, also
Right.
known as ecstasy, Molly, very popular rave drug.
Right.
Um, yeah, I think it's very interesting um, to evaluate the question, where does one start?
Right. I'm actually looking here.
Yeah.
One of our buddies here commented, my buddy Marty Reinhardt, he commented on this chat asking if you could define sobriety, if you could, please. Maybe your own version of what that looks like.
Ooh,
Kind of
that's
broad,
that's a great question,
huh?
Marty. That's a tough question. Sobriety is, for my personal definition of it, it's a state in which you are no longer debilitated by a substance or an activity. So, in other words, if you had a specific substance, whether it was alcohol, gambling, pornography, um, these substances or acts are removed from your life and you feel better.
That I like that. That's a good definition. I like
That
that.
is my version of sobriety. And I know through Alcoholics Anonymous, it's very interesting because they're very pushed for, how do I say, non-psychoactive substances. There's a very big push for, not, it's very all or nothing
Mhm.
mindset. And I'm not trying to talk poorly. I'm all for communities coming together, but I find it a little bit interesting that coffee and cigarettes are promoted in vaping. And if nicotine is your thing, I mean, it's been shown to cause severe damage to the body, to each his own. Like, many of these substances we've talked about, there could be negative consequences. So it's important to evaluate the negative, the pros and the cons. And as time goes on and more research is promoted, we can truly see the negative effects. I don't know if you've heard, it's cannabis hyperemesis syndrome.
Mm-mm.
And yeah, it's a pretty interesting condition. In other words, hardcore users of cannabis will have severe nausea and vomiting. And it's a very common occurrence when somebody takes a very large dose. And it's interesting because oftentimes people will remedy it with either a hot shower.
Huh.
It's very interesting. I don't know why.
Yeah,
Um,
that is interesting because cannabis has always taken away my nausea. I wonder
yeah,
how if maybe if it's eaten versus smoked, if that
that's a
makes.
great question. And that's something, though, that we didn't even talk about is the route of administration. You're exactly right. Oral mechanisms are very different versus injecting or snorting or just taking it orally. Um, our body is very interesting in how it protects us. It's a shield from foreign things. And when we put things into our body, it does this amazing dance around the substance to try and break it down and get it out of our system through either urination, defecation, or sweating, breathing.
Throwing up like what I
Yeah,
did.
or throwing up. Yeah. So,
See,
but oh, go
sorry.
ahead. No, please.
Yeah, no, I was just curious. You mentioned like a few different ways of like consuming something, right? So like you can snort it, you can smoke, you can eat, whatever. With
Yeah,
mushrooms, how can you smoke it? I've never heard of anyone being able to smoke it. And if
that's a great question. So, from my understanding, I don't personally believe that it would be really psychoactive. Somebody could probably show me a different source. Otherwise, I'd be very interested to see. From my understanding, it cannot be smoked, but normally it's taken either as the whole fruit of the fungi or in a psilocybin pill form. And
Mhm.
that is extracted from the magic mushroom. And you essentially break down the cellular wall of the plant, mush it up, and then perform chemical reactions to create the simple molecular structure of psilocybin. But there's a interesting paradigm of the entourage effects. And in other words, it's saying that there could be multiple substances or multiple molecules within the magic mushroom or within the cannabis plant that promotes or depromotes binding for other molecules because it's a dance. In the cannabis plant, there are over 100 known cannabinoids, and they could potentially be playing a role with one another, and some are more important than others. As we've heard, certain cannabinoids include THC delta 9, CBD, CBN,
Mhm.
and then there's also what I am not too fond of are the synthetic cannabinoids, also known as spice and K2, which is essentially chemical splashed. So, yeah, I think that it's interesting, even amongst different molecules, it's a dance within how we consume them and how the molecules bind to the receptor. So I don't know. I really don't know. And I would really like to continue seeing more researchers investigate. Number one, cut all the fat off and get to the meat. What are the key players of the molecules? How are they binding to the brain? And how is that promoting behavioral changes? That's what I'm interested in is, okay, you take this, it makes you think in a different way. But how do we get to that person to say, okay, the next day I feel great. The next day, okay, I feel great again. What about a week later? What about a month later? What about a year later? How long does it taper down before you have to redose? Yeah, these are all mysteries that I would really, really like to investigate. But sorry, going back to your friend's, excuse me, the audience question, sobriety though was a really, really interesting one because
Yeah.
yeah, it's difficult. It's tough. You have to establish your own version of sobriety because if you're continuing doing the act of something that leads you to a negative lifestyle, then I wouldn't do it.
Right. Right. Dude, Hodge, thank you so much for coming
Yeah.
here, man. This is so valuable. I wanted to bring you on because I know you're a true expert. You're in this field. You're not just like eating some shrooms and now you're an expert. You're really in
No.
this field. You know what's going on, man.
Thank you so much, Carlos.
Kind of off topic before we hop off.
Yeah.
Have you had a chance to play any poker over there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, in the state of Wisconsin, there are no poker rooms. However,
Home game, baby.
there are some home games. And furthermore, there is the Rivers Casino in Des Plaines, Illinois, near Chicago. And that's where Wolfgang.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, no, it's
That from
interesting.
you.
Yeah.
How far is that
So,
place from you over there? That casino.
that casino is probably about 2 hours.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe you can make a little weekend trip out of it.
Yeah, no, I'm itching to play. I've been watching all the reels on the World Series, and it's exciting. One of
Yeah.
these years, would love to go.
Yeah. Well, you've gone, dude. Well, you've
We'll go
played.
back, I should say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Return.
Yeah, man, it's fun. We got to do another little crew trip. Hodge, if you guys don't know, is part of our like poker crew. He just moved to Wisconsin, but we have a little Arizona poker crew. We basically play together, every few days or every weekend or something like that. And Hodge is part of that crew. He just is a scientist too, so he had to go do his science stuff and be a
Yes.
smart man. But
Thank you.
yeah,
Yes, Carlos, I cannot say thank you so much for having me on and giving me a platform to just kind of, shout out ideas and have a conversation. Yeah, psychedelics are exciting and they can be, the traditional definition of it, mind manifesting.
I love it. I love it. So I know you don't have you're actually in the field. You're not like selling a course or any of this type of stuff.
Oh goodness, no, I'm only a graduate student. And
Right.
it's interesting because I'm at the point right now where the more I read, the less I think I actually, the less I know.
Right. Wow.
And it's really daunting. And I just want to really humble myself. And my goal and my purpose is to really, really push for people's well-being and happiness. Because if you are really struggling with suicidality, talk to somebody about it.
Yeah. Guys, if you want to follow him, make sure you hit him up. I don't know where you can get followed. Can we follow you on Instagram or something, man?
Yeah, that would be all right. Yeah. So go ahead and follow me on Instagram at my Hosobe.
Perfect. And then if you guys have any podcasts that you want to bring him on so you guys can talk about magic mushrooms, psilocybin, or anything else, hit him up. I'm sure he'll be okay with it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, man. This was super educational and I loved every minute of it. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're amazing, Carlos. Thank you very much. I appreciate you.
You got it, man. Talk soon and I'll see you